Hi, welcome back to Thrifty in OKC. If you are new to the channel, I am a part-time reseller who lives in Oklahoma City, and I sell on Poshmark, Etsy, and eBay. I use the profits to pay off all my debt, so we are now a debt-free household, and we now use our reselling profits for travel and other fun things. So today, I wanted to share with you guys the 5 reasons that I like to sell on Etsy. I sell, as I said, Poshmark, eBay, and Etsy is probably my favorite platform of the 3. So one of the main reasons that I like to sell on Etsy is Etsy has a list it, I've got a little list here as you can see, a list it and forget it platform, I feel like. So Poshmark, if you sell on there, you know you have to do a lot of sharing. eBay, you have to constantly be listing and updating things to keep yourself high in Cassini, which is their algorithm search platform. Etsy, you list it, you pay 20 cents, and you can kind of forget it and leave it alone. So I love that. For 20 cents, you get 4 months, I believe. Might have gone down to 3, but I think it's still 4. And you put it up there. Once you've taken the pictures and done the listing, you can even set it to renew automatically so that it will just renew every 4 months. And that's costing you 20 cents. So you can opt not to do that if you want to kind of try to work on your titles or decrease the price or something. Etsy does have some different promotional tools, and you can do those if you wanted to do that. But for the most part, you put it up there and it sits out there. So that's the number 1. It's very low maintenance once you have your item up. Number 2, I love the Etsy community. So as a buyer and as a seller, I have sold, I've had very few problems. I've sold on Etsy since 2013 for vintage. And in that time, I have maybe had like 5 people who I have had a problem with. For the most part, people are very respectful, very kind. I think people who love and appreciate vintage and love and appreciate handmade, you're going to have a lot of artisans, a lot of people who just kind of, you know, walk to the beat of their own drum, walk to the beat of that. I don't know if that's right, but I think you know what I'm saying. So very kind community. Everybody's very helpful. I shouldn't say everybody because I'm sure there's somebody out there who's not, but getting on their boards to try to ask questions and things like that. The Etsy, they respond very quickly when you have an inquiry. I don't really have anything bad or negative to say about their community. I think it's a great community. The number 3 thing I love about being on Etsy is I make a lot more money on Etsy for vintage than I do on any other site. So vintage, just so you know, is 20 years or older. I was about to say newer, 20 years or older. So yes, that means 2000 is considered vintage at this point, which is crazy to think about, but that is considered vintage. So I feel that when I have put vintage items up on $14.99 on eBay and I can't get a bid. I will put them up, the same item, then I will move it to Etsy and I can sell it for $68. So it might sit a little while. I might have to have it sit a little bit to look for the right buyer. And then I feel like Etsy, I can get more on Etsy than Poshmark because 1, I feel like a lot of people on Poshmark are looking for a good deal, which no shame in that. And 2, you can't ship overseas on Poshmark. So I have a lot of buyers who live in Australia, the UK, places like that, and they don't have access to vintage like we do in a lot of places here. So they are willing to pay higher prices. And by selling on Poshmark, I don't have the option to ship there. So I lose out on those people who are willing to pay up for good vintage pieces. So, it is an example, again, I got to look at my notes here, but an example being that like this last week, I think I sold 6 pieces, and after fees, I netted still for $460 something. So I would not make that on 6 pieces on Poshmark to save my life, and surely not on eBay. Just, I sold several items that were over $100 this week, which was awesome. So my fourth thing that I love about selling on Etsy is I feel like there's less competition. And let me explain what I mean by that. I don't mean necessarily people. I more so mean that I feel that on Poshmark, I might have a Free People top and 10 other people have that exact same Free People top. And so I am competing with those other 10 people that have the black tassel Free People top in a size 4. On Etsy, you're gonna have more one-of-a-kind, unique vintage items. So while there might be 25 1970s hostess dresses, more than likely they're gonna be a little bit different styles, different prints. You just don't you can't go to TJ Maxx on yellow clearance day and pick up a ton of vintage stuff and then it's oversaturated on the market. That doesn't happen. I'm not saying it never happens. It just doesn't happen very often. So I feel the competition in that regard, not necessarily number of people selling, is much less, which also means because my item might be one of a kind and quite often is one of a kind, at least in terms of Etsy, I can price a little bit higher because if somebody wants mine, they can't go to another seller and get it for a cheaper price because it's not out there. So the fifth reason that I like selling on Etsy is I feel that Etsy vintage for me is easier to source. So I live in Oklahoma City, and if you watch my videos, you've heard me talk before, I always joke at my bins, like I don't have access to Gucci or Chanel or Prada or a lot of the really high-end labels that, I mean, I don't even find Wild Fox. So it's just a different community, and we don't have a lot of designer stores, and we have one Lululemon that we've got in the last like 5 years. So I don't have the access to stuff like people in the bigger cities have, but I do seem to have a really good access to vintage, and it's not super high priced here. A lot of the estate sales price very reasonably. Most of them are like $5 for vintage dresses, $2 for vintage tops. We have a lot of rural farming communities, and I'm shocked at how much stuff I can find sometimes going out to an estate or garage sale at one of those places. So there are a lot of sourcing opportunities for vintage, I feel, here that are not maybe in some of the bigger cities, and also are not that, I don't know where I was going with that. That all being said, there are some good opportunities for vintage sourcing if you live in a smaller town or city like I do, or even if you live in like a rural area. I mean, don't count vintage out. That could be a great moneymaker for you that you can still get a high profit on. I am spending a lot of time on Poshmark selling a lot of bread and butter items, and bread and butter items are great, and I like to get the money for those. But you know, J. Crew, your Ann Taylor, your Madewell, stuff like that, I'm not gonna get $100 off of that. Where I could get $100 off of that 1970s Hostess polyester dress if it's in immaculate condition. You know, for somebody going on a Hawaii cruise, they want that, and they're gonna pay for it. So don't count Etsy out. So that's kind of my thing. And if you've been hesitant to start on there, give it a try. You know, again, it costs you 20 cents to list something up. That is not a huge investment, and I think it's well worth it. Put up 20 or 30 items if you have some stuff sitting around, or maybe you've listed it on Poshmark, or maybe you've tried it on eBay and it hasn't worked. Get yourself a shop, get it open, and give it a go. And if you don't like it in 4 months, shut it down and don't do it anymore. So you got to keep trying new things. So that's about it. Those are my 5 reasons why I love selling on Etsy, selling vintage on Etsy. I don't know a lot about selling handmade on Etsy, but those are my vintage reasons. If you liked the video today, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, hit the bell, leave a comment. Any interaction you have with the channel really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. And if you have an Etsy shop and you love selling vintage, please leave a link down below. I'd love to go in and check out your store and see what kind of stuff that you have. And if you have any questions about selling on Etsy, please let me know. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Thanks so much for watching today. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.